Do you know how much DG we have um, already interconnected officially? Lumen.
I saw something recently that was like 750 megawatts.
Well, I saw like 852 in some recent report
That's
at
the
the end of
number.
last year. Yeah.
850. Do you know what the ratio of the interconnection request is per month?
I was just looking that up, and it looks like we've gotten about 10 to 12,000 this year.
No. I'm talking about megawatts. How in quantity?
Oh,
How many megawatts are per month average? There's a range. 18 to 22 megawatts a month. So if you do the math, it's not hard to do. We'll be at a gigawatt of DG of DR by the end of the year.
Yeah.
so
That's gonna
this
put us, and again, do the math. That's gonna put us at perhaps top 3 worldwide per capita.
so this is probably the right way to jump into our conversation. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sam Tallman, Director of Energy Services at Green Power Technologies, Puerto Rico. We develop small hydroelectric projects here on the island, throughout the Caribbean, and throughout the rest of the United States. Joining me, my conversation partner, founding director of Fundación Borincana, Tom King. Tom, how are you, sir?
Yo. I'm doing well. I'm doing well, and obviously good to be here. So normally you'd have Ron here, Ron Leonard. He's actually had to go and deal with something this evening. So he's off doing that. He did tease us with something though, saying that he's hoping to be able to come back in a week or two and announce the availability of a lot of money to invest in Puerto Rico. He didn't say anything to me more than that on a short phone call. But in any event, we want to keep with the spirit, I think, of Ron and Power Hour as this being an opportunity to talk about issues, whine a little bit, complain a little bit, have a beer because it's after work, and be a little bit more, less politically correct with some of our phrasing in some of this hour. So yeah, looking forward to it. We'll miss Ron. We actually joked earlier about logging on with another address and just having a blank screen and putting Ron Leonard at the bottom of it and occasionally asking him what he thought of something. But maybe we'll do that next time.
I still fundamentally believe that a Ron Leonard sock puppet, somewhere providing commentary, it would fit right in, be on brand.
Bloomberg Bear.
Yeah, there you go. We're gonna be talking this power hour about what's going on in the broad planning for the energy system on the island. There have been a couple of major studies about how to achieve 100% renewable, 100% energy independence, 100% clean energy production on the island. We're going to dive into that in 1 second. Just a bit of housekeeping. You will see a new addition to much of the emails that many of the emails that we're sending out that includes a PayPal link. That is humbly asking for your membership. We think it's a small fee to support the programs that we are, the segments that we're running, the analysis that we want to put out, the news, regular news blast that we were just mentioning. Regular update on what's coming out of the Energy Bureau, an opportunity for companies or experts in different sectors of the economy to lead working groups and put together white papers on their areas of expertise, whether that's certain areas of regulation or certain technologies, R&D, finance opportunities, battery recycling, you name it. There's a lot of different areas that we're interested in. And when you say energy, obviously there's a lot of different things that we could be talking about, and we want to make sure that we are not narrow-minded when it comes to what does that mean? What does it mean for Puerto Rico? What does it mean for our conversation? And what does it mean for the membership? And so you have an area of expertise, we want to empower you to take a leadership role in some of these conversations. Additionally, we have started a cartoon caption contest, and we are not expert cartoonists. And so if you know an expert cartoonist or an amateur cartoonist or are one yourself and want to participate in putting together some artwork, we'd welcome that as a contribution. But nevertheless, you'll see it attached to our follow-ups and emails, and that will be announced every last Tuesday of the month when we do our general forum meeting, and then we'll review the caption submissions the next month at the next meeting. So probably at the end of our hour today, Tom, we should share what our last cartoon was and give an opportunity to get some feedback on it. Additionally, as I mentioned, we are having a general forum, which is the last Tuesday of the month. The Thursday before that is our Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes, which is your go-to for energy news and regular energy updates, and is less of a conversation piece, but we will have an expert on with us to talk about that from either the public sector, private sector, or a nonprofit sector that's doing work on the island. And then, of course, this segment, which is the Thursday before that, and is Power Hour, where these are this and the Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes are both at 6 p.m. Puerto Rico time. And so if you're above age of majority and enjoy adult beverage, we would encourage you to join us. So as is the spirit, no pun intended, of serious people trying not to take themselves that seriously. Tom, we have had a couple of conversations recently, and I think the energy sector broadly on the island is having a conversation in the last couple of months about reflecting on the last 10 years of progress in Puerto Rican energy. It's 10 years since Act 57 of 2014 was enacted, which broke up PREPA's monopoly. It put us on a path towards 100% renewable. It created the Energy Bureau. We have begun over this process putting together integrated resource plans with the new regulator, with new operators in Luma and Genera, still with PREPA's oversight. Obviously, having a fiscal oversight board plays a role in making sure that utility economics and the island's fiscal situation is responsibly managed and planned. There's political changes we've covered that are going to take effect on the island in January, one way or another. And there was a recent report that shows Luma's outage duration has gone up in the 3 years they've taken place. There's been a couple of major studies that have shown where we can achieve 100% renewable. The DOE PR 100 study, this study out of Finland and at the LUT, the Lute Institute, and Luma just requested an 11-month delay in the integrated resource planning. We contracted through Tranche 1. We, being the island of Puerto Rico, the Energy Bureau, and under the oversight or through PREPA and under the oversight of the Energy Bureau, contracted 885 or so megawatts of utility solar in the first tranche of a 3.75 gigawatt procurement process. I just laid a lot lot there. Where are we? Because there's a lot of mixed signals.
I only have one question for you. It's in 39 parts.
No, I guess my point is that half of that looks like a lot of progress, and half of it looks like, what have we gotten done? And I think that there's great news on the DG side, as Ignacio seeded our conversation with.
I think that's
Net
what you keep
metering seems
pointing
to be
to,
on
exactly
risk.
what Ignacio was saying. Yeah.
How does all this balance out? Because I think that, I look at it and I say there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and then I see a whole bunch of reasons why we haven't achieved the progress that has been initiated in so many of these areas.
Yeah, I think I'd also add on to your list, though. I mean, the bankruptcy, right, which you didn't talk about, which is sort of going on through all this and in the background, and still
Yep.
going on. And then against that, junta versus government versus public, is another one. Look, Puerto Rico has actually accomplished more than kind of anybody else, anywhere in the world over this period of time, and it's pretty good against the background of the circumstances that we just talked about: government, poverty, lack of this, lack of that, lack of experience, lack of institutional, commercial, and individual capacity. But the fact that it's actually done, and you see things like 852 megawatts of distributed generation has actually happened over this period of time. You can thank in part some some subsidies and other things like that, but not much, right? I mean, if you think about some of the things that are coming up, there's a lot of money. They're priming the pump. They're doing Exceso Solar. You've got the recent announcements. That money really has yet to come into the market. The things that have been driving this 852 megawatts is mostly Puerto Rican people and businesses themselves, right?
Well,
I mean,
and
yeah.
just even in the background of that, having a high cost, low quality default really drives the market to people saying,
Well,
wait, I can have a better solution on my roof doing it myself, or working with a financing partner, and uh, clock out from that system,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean, I think the enemy of all of this in both ways is irrational expectations, right? There are plenty of people, groups in Puerto Rico advocating for things that are just completely unrealistic, and would in fact probably destroy the balance and the progress and the economic development that is beginning to take place, despite the existence of the bankruptcy, despite the failure of the RFP program that you were talking about before, which I've been bemoaning since the very beginning that it was poorly planned and poorly executed, and it continues. But we've set it up, I think, right now for the conversation we're having in a couple of weeks with La Injerencia about the large producers association and what's going on with the RFP. It's not without hope. The largest scale renewables and the transition, the ability to think about turning off or getting rid of some of the larger and more expensive oil producing plants at the very least. How do you address the soon to be absence of coal on the grid? From a health perspective, from a climate change perspective, from a political accomplishment and social accomplishment perspective, that's absolutely a good thing. From an economic development, stability, and other types of things, it's not a particularly good thing because we really don't have anything yet to replace it. It's going to make the grid weaker, and we just don't know at this point. We hope we're going to see completion and construction of larger scale renewables within that period of time. Well, if you're an all the above kind of balanced approach to providing stable electricity, you can hope that there are either gas conversions or gas plants brought on within that period of time to replace that generation to meet the load. Or you could hope that 500,000 people leave Puerto Rico and the demand drops to accommodate the lower amount of baseload electricity out of the island, which nobody wants. But those are some of the balances that you unfortunately have to think about it.
and that's definitely one way to live out the reality of a J curve, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it is that drop in demand would be exactly that. So let me ask you this, and I think that expectation
By the way, just you used J curve, and I've used it before in these contexts. Not everyone has a background in macroeconomics. But they in the beginning macroeconomics, they do teach you this, and effectively it's you start making changes. You invest for the future. You shut down the grid, for example, to put in a new upgrade, etc. Businesses have to close or reduce their operations economically. They're doing so well. And what the J curve represents is things get worse, and then they accelerate better once the things come back and have been improved. Stability is there, etc. So the investments, the changes, and other things that we're talking about making, not to a particular area, but to the economy and to the energy and the energy resiliency and stability, can have those types of moments where things are going to get worse seemingly before they get better.
Yeah, and on that note, there was an event this morning in Coamo, and in recent news, the mayor of Coamo, which is south central side of the island, um, suggested that because of the energy situation, not just in his community, but in Santa Isabel, which has made a bunch of news recently because it's the destination for uh, semi-doomed or fully doomed mega transformer, depending on how you look at it, and sort of the surrounding communities. He 3 days ago gave an interview to the newspaper where he said 30 to 35 municipalities might have to close, in part because of their ability to collect revenue, and part of that is collecting taxes from businesses. How do you attract businesses? Well, you make certain public services easier to access, and that may be a bit on the pessimistic side, but that's sort of the initial loss in the J curve that you're talking about, where you have major operational deficiencies that have an impact on the everyday operation of 30 to 35 municipalities would be just about 40% of the island's communities, which that's no small number.
Yeah.
So just thinking about the 852 megawatts in distributed generation, this 18, let's average it at 20 megawatts a month in terms of requested interconnections, and putting that into context of some of the poor management of expectations, both on the high side and low side. You and I have been discussing this recent report from the Breakthrough Institute that says in the DOE's PR100 study, the island deploys 2 gigawatts to 5.6 gigawatts of distributed PV across all scenarios. And utility solar PV reaches 172 megawatts to 512 megawatts. Now, there's plenty of challenges with the PR100 study, to say the least, and we'll get into some of the other ones. But just based on those numbers, the Tranche 1 projects are 885 megawatts or so of projects. That's utility scale solar. We have 852 with a trend that's continuing to grow strong on the distributed side. My initial look at those numbers is we're way off, the PR100 study is way off of, it's not tethered to the situation on the ground.
No, but it's probably more tethered to the situation on the ground than the LUT study.
So let's start with PR100 and or at least on this point, and then we'll get into sort of the comparison of these studies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the PR 100 study is a bit more rigorous in the way that it approaches the situation on the ground, and it's much more conservative relative to the development and deployment of new technologies and integration. And it's there's also the politics around it are obviously a little bit more challenging than the pretty straightforward go all out with the LUT study, which is just kind of overly optimistic renewables. It's not really tied to what's on the ground. Can you do that? Yeah. Will you do that? Yeah. Puerto Rico is going to get its act together, not before the election, but in terms of being able to execute on the grid connected stuff. A lot of it is technical. It's been difficult. A lot of it is just no experience in how you establish and run a program. And there's the bankruptcy in the background, right? It's really difficult to get people to pay attention to Puerto Rico when your counterparty is going to be bankrupt, right? You know, do you spend the time? Do you put in the effort to bring the A team? There really aren't. No offense to anybody who's actually in there. There's nobody bidding or putting things together or in the first round or even the second round that you would think of as a global A team for development ownership of these types of assets. That doesn't mean they're not very good. It doesn't mean that they're not very qualified developers, but they don't bring the sort of commodity. By commodity, I mean regular low cost of capital, et cetera. These are capital dependent developers. Most of them, they're not people who take a balance sheet or a portfolio approach. Those people don't come until you've got established pathways, until they know how to execute and they can execute and bring their advantages to a market. The people in the market right now are pathfinders. They're looking for an opportunity to develop a project, but also make significantly outsized returns for taking the early risk, right? And so, you know, if you're doing a stable market development, and you know the pathways and you know the approval and you know what your competitors are, you know what your cost of financing is going to be, you know that it's going to take 3 months to bid the project, 3 months before you've got the bid won, a couple of months maybe to work out some kinks in the interconnection agreement, but everything else, you know, the terms of the contracts are done, you know, the counterparty is a triple B plus, you know, the way that they organize their funds, well, yeah, that's easy. We can motivate, we can bring capital to that, we can close quickly. Right? We can get everything done. In Puerto Rico, none of that is there. None of that is evident. And they didn't do anything in the planning or the execution to try and address these uncertainties. You know, the first couple of rounds were always going to be the big guys or the more experienced guys sitting it out. But you could have moved more quickly. I mean, even with a quasi-bankrupt entity, you know, it's being held effectively in a receivership by the junta at this point. And you could do things to create a lot more certainty about the payment under these contracts. You could have identified and created a special charge, you know, on the payments of the bills that would go and be, you know, set aside, not for all the payment, but to create a reserve, right? So that if things ran low, the people would be able to see it. You could create a waterfall with the regulator. There already is one to some extent based on the bankruptcy, but so they could see where is our money coming from, understand how things are going to be decided. Do we decide these things in arbitration? If there's a dispute, do we decide them under Puerto Rican law? Who knows? You know, these things all eventually get set. So, I mean, I'm getting into a lot of the problems, and I don't want to, these are also questions that we want to ask Julian in a couple of weeks, because they're the ones who've been working through these very things. And it seems the short-term answer to the bankruptcy isn't let's get our shit together, term of art, right? Let's get our stuff together. And really put something understandable in a contractual sense, in a counterparty sense, that mitigates the risk that people take, and so that we can begin to bring things to the market. They're going to have to do that anyway, but in order to overcome that, we're talking about bringing in the DOE in the loan program office as a guarantor across these things. There's been very little of it in the press, and I don't know if it's going to apply to everyone, but people are working on it. And it might actually be, they may be doing this based on something that I said to Jigger about 3 or 4 years ago, when there's this provision about carbon communities and trying to use that to kind of replace stuff. I don't know if that's what they're using to justify the ability to go in and do a whole class of projects and accept effectively the counterparty risk associated with a bankrupt counterparty, which they normally wouldn't do in the LPO. You know, they're about taking technology risk. They're about taking new structure risk. They're not really taking counterparty risk. It sounds like a strange idea, but they are not they're not Exim, right? They're They're not opaque. You know, they don't go in and take political risk or counterparty risk associated with it. They are there as loan program office typically to take a different set of risks.
Though that is very much reflective of the fact that the political interests on the national level of achieving a clean energy grid nationally and globally and in Puerto Rico very much align with where the policy and regulatory framework is locally. And it's not the first time we've seen the federal government make certain structures or processes a little bit more flexible to make sure that Puerto Rico can apply for the benefit of the progress of those programs. The one of the other challenges, just while we're speaking about the LPO, is and this is going to be a little bit of the conversation that we continue with Julian, is that and with the tranche projects in general, the RFPs that were put out to attract utility scale solar development, and it's a utility scale development, but so far everything's only been solar, and I think that's part of the missed expectations that we can talk about as well. But for utility scale solar is that for projects to be economical in Puerto Rico, they're looking at 40 megawatt minimums, and projects that require the 160 to 200 acres for these projects are much slower to get done in a place where you've got more limited land and more limited interconnection capacity in a place like Puerto Rico anyway. So you've got a variety of factors that are limiting the supply of the projects that you can even evaluate, on top of having the high cost of capital and the hoops you have to jump through with the LPO or the DOE, and having a counterparty that is in the financial situation that PREPA finds itself. So
Yeah.
We have so many different
to a discussion around the NREL study.
Yeah, let's do it.
No,
Take
it's
us
just
there.
because I think it's worthwhile. I mean, by the way, I mean the financing thing. Once you've got a bank to lend you money, or even the DOE, now they want to know that you can get the insurance package coverage that you need. That's tough in Puerto Rico, and the premiums are ridiculously high relative. I mean, in some cases, I've seen them be 2 to 3x what they are in other places. I'll just throw that out there because I haven't seen anybody focus on that yet, because the projects are not close enough to financial close to get to the point of going for insurance market bids. So recently, actually, I don't know how recently the study came out, but they've been talking about it. 68-page study from NREL, specifically addressing the ability of siting solar and storage facilities on brownfield, even Superfund sites, closed landfills, and bodies of water. I believe this was prompted by the whole pushback from the Puerto Rico food movement about turning farmland into solar farms, which, given the situation in Puerto Rico, is a reasonable question that should be asked. Of course, in the land of irrational expectations, what they called for was a ban on any solar farms rather than a requirement of dual use or other types of things, which would make much more sense. But it's a useful study. I think there've been some comments on a couple of the forums. Angel, who is not on here, made some really good comments in a posting from Energía Estratégica, and he was basically saying, okay, well, like there's going to be problems kind of getting access to some of this stuff. People need to get things together. He didn't get into specifics, but say you want to put floating solar on some of the lakes, like the lakes around Dos Bocas or one of those. Probably an excellent idea. Things that I've already talked to people about, and I know that CP and the Micro de Montaña and some of their programs, they have an idea about doing that. But what's the permitting regime, right? First of all, who has the right to allow you? What requirements or recommendations are they going to insist on? Those lakes are used for recreational use as well.
Also, well,
Those
and
lakes.
Tom,
Yeah.
if I may here, even getting
Yeah,
into
sure.
some of
Please.
the critical questions you're asking, just
Yeah.
the economics of those
The
projects
hydro
don't
guy.
make sense. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're looking at a 40 megawatt minimum project on ground mount, which is the most straightforward project you could do, we don't have the lakes aren't that big. I mean, there's the lakes aren't that big to have the surface area to make these projects viable as from just a back of the envelope calculation to to be taken seriously as far as I'm concerned.
Let me push back against that a bit, because one of the things that you do by identifying these sites, and hopefully having people, the government, etc., do pre-work, if you like, to set these up as potential sites for developers. Maybe like having if it's a landfill and it's controlled by the government of Puerto Rico, or if the lakes are controlled by the government of Puerto Rico, you could set the terms, and you could do a lease like you would do oil and gas leases, and give people the right to develop them and kind of clear the roads for them. If you lower the risk, you lower the cost. And one of the biggest things that are driving the minimum 40 megawatt is that the fixed cost of developing a project in time and effort and money and everything else, and time and time and time, means that you got to have bigger projects in order to cover the amount that you're likely to spend to get to a price that you're likely to be able to sell at, to cover that early risk and all the money that you got to put out. If you change that equation, and you change the amount of money that people reasonably have to spend up front, then the minimum viable kind of connected to the grid bid project, or even 5 megawatt to 10 megawatt community solar project, becomes much more viable, and much less likely to need to have that kind of scale in order to make it worthwhile.
Yeah,
So
it ends up just being somewhat academic because we're still not able to get the more straightforward projects through the pipeline
right,
all the way. And
right,
that's not to say they won't. I think certainly the Tranche One projects, at least a majority of them, will get through that process. But
yeah,
success begets success. We got to make sure that we can show that you can at least get those straightforward projects done before we start getting creative about how do we do photovoltaics on a much more limited, perhaps murky, jurisdictional fight, and necessitating government authorities step in and say, yeah, we'll take care of many of the other infrastructure needs so that this is a more straightforward, less risky project. Those we're just still very far away from that, and the bankruptcy issue of the counterparty is still not going to be resolved. Let's go back to
right,
agriculture lands for a second, because I
great.
think that this is an area where um, there's a there's a goofiness to think that the future of agriculture in Puerto Rico is going to be land and labor intensive. And the event this morning was with the USDA, and the mixed use agriculture that we see in Illumina, in Salinas, where you've got sheep around the AES solar farm. It's a very, very cool project, and I think that sort of thing is totally replicable. When we're thinking about growing food beyond stock like that, there's got to be some creativity to say, that the future of agriculture in Puerto Rico is going to be technological. It's going to be vertical. It's going to be indoor. It's going to be a lot more sophisticated than poorly mechanized things in the ground, that's largely labor intensive, and it also is going to require some scale. And so, I've been looking forward to some pushback against the people that say, well, let's study how do we do it on other lands. When I was going out with utility scale solar developers looking for sites, in my previous role, with all sensitivity, they would ask the landowners, because it's zoned agricultural, um, how's the community going to receive this? We want to be sensitive to the fact that this is traditional ag land, and the quote unquote farmers who own the land kind of threw their hands up and looked around and said, "What agriculture? We haven't grown anything here for 30 years." And so there's if agriculture locally produced is going to be competitive,
Yeah.
it's not going to be done on the tranches of land that utility scale solar projects are going to be done on. Just
Right.
isn't. And I think the DOE study, if nothing else, showed pretty clearly that even on their more land restrictive studies, utility scale solar was a viable option without impacting some of the ag zoned parcels that would have otherwise raised most of the flags for the environmental community that I think just needs to be told, no, we're not going to waste another federal government study to appease you because it just I don't see the necessity for
I
it.
mean,
It seems entirely unnecessary.
the federal government doesn't have any problem doing studies. That's what those
They love it.
departments exist for. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's true.
a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. Yeah, look, I think you run into this. There's a real problem in terms of self-sufficiency in terms of food in Puerto Rico.
No
So
doubt about it.
prima facie, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be taking active land out of production, or land that's zoned or could be active out of production. Now you got to look at that pragmatically as you're talking about. Where is most of it going to happen? What are we likely to do? When you go into a supermarket, and I actually haven't been to a supermarket in Puerto Rico in a couple of years, but a head of lettuce is $6, $7. I mean, it's that kind of odd situation. So you want to bring the cost down, you want better security. The romantic notion is of the small farmer doing things, and there is going to be I think a great market in Puerto Rico for small, specific organic fincas doing specific things. There's some
Yep.
people doing amazing things right now, but large scale agriculture is not going to be that way. However, woe to the politician that says anything about this or does anything to puncture the romantic notion about farmers, or say that it's okay to do this. So I think it's likely to be a while working it out, which is why you really should be focusing on, are there easier ways to do this? Why is this politically popular? Can we turn some of these brownfield sites and other areas? But it's going to take a cooperation, and unfortunately, the government has to take a lead on this. But we haven't seen anything or anywhere where the government can act with the will, sure, but with the competence and the follow through to actually be able to do this. So I wait and see if there's a big opportunity and potentially a big pull from the private sector or private sector developers to get access to some of this land. I suspect that might be the needed push for the next, whichever administration we're talking about, whether this is a Jennifer administration or whatever, to take the initiative, pass some legislation, put something in place in order to develop this land for development of renewables. It's
Well,
basically.
and this is where federal dollars come into play to de-risk those projects. Is that the EPA and Carmen Guerrero have been very bullish on making sure that there's
Yeah.
technical assistance and program support. Now, we all know some of the challenges, as we were talking about with the LPO, with government dollars. They're not as easy or as cheap as they're branded to be. But nevertheless, you don't have to create a program from whole cloth. And I think that NREL study may serve as a valuable baseline down the line where it shows, okay, there's a degree of feasibility. We've got somebody who's benchmarked it before, that's independent, that's just pro development and not in our pocket, right? And we'll see what happens in a potential change on the federal level. But those EPA funds are still there and allocated. And the current administration, at least, is very, very bullish on making sure that brownfield development is done. Puerto Rico has no shortage of blighted assets and stranded assets, and so I think that this could be a very cool project. One of the things that I'll say, and just a last point on agriculture, is not all agriculture is created equal in the broad sense, and there are folks that are interested in doing cacao farming, and I'm a huge fan of delicious chocolate. Don't get me wrong, but it does not contribute to food security. And so that type of land development is not the same as doing, staple consumer products for domestic consumption. It's a different style of agriculture, and I think that's something that has never properly been articulated. There's plenty of people I know that are like, yeah, let's do a cacao farm. It's like, well, that's fine, but if you're doing it out of the love of food sovereignty, when you're exporting to a very boutique global cacao market, that just is the different style of our agriculture altogether. And I think we should be at least sober about what the distinction between one type of agriculture and the other, and what the necessities are. Cacao
Yeah.
is an in the ground activity. Growing lettuce hydroponically is not.
Yep.
And so what do we need more? I would prefer lettuce, frankly.
Well,
So
cacao and coffee are actually two potentially good candidates for dual use setups,
also,
because they need to grow in partial shade, and they usually grow together with other flora on their farms. But sometimes that makes it harder to harvest. You might be you can have setups where you've got connected solar that can be moved. It's more expensive. It's a different sort of racking setup, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see whether these can become energy producers. I think the distraction though is that they tend also to be in mountain regions in Puerto Rico, and there are plenty other options, less expensive options to put distributed energy and resiliency within the mountain grids at this point, because the total demand there is actually relatively low. So if you cite a bunch of potential generation there, you could end up with just too much generation within the mountain
yeah,
node, way to get the
yeah.
power out. Yeah.
I see that as an opportunity, and Alexis Pascaris has done good work from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory on this. And Ignacio, thanks for bringing her to the island and helping facilitate those projects. I see Puerto Rico from the cacao and agriculture, agrivoltaics, and sloped farming in harder environments. All of that is a leadership opportunity for the island, right? We shouldn't be relying on that for any significant piece of local generation. It should be a matter of, this is the study that can be done and replicated in other places where it makes a lot of sense. I know that we've got about 15 minutes left in our officially slotted hour. Tom, let's get back into this Breakthrough Institute comparison of the
Yeah.
DOE study and the LUT study. So the DOE PR 100 studies, 843-page report, 2 years, lots of fanfare, and I think with perhaps some exceptions, disappointed almost everybody that dug into it. I think there was a couple of people who were able to pick out things and quotes that they liked, and I think that a lot of people saw it as a valuable process of accumulating data through the power of the federal government, where they have access to modeling tools and data reports, and also a budget to be able to do this kind of thing. So they took a load off of a lot of other people, but at the end of the day, their conclusions were, yes, technically you can achieve 100% renewable. It's going to be enormously expensive. You're not going to hit your intermediary milestones, and you may not hit your final one. I think, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it was 100% renewable sounded like a stand-in for solar for the most part, and the vast majority of their generation between now and at least 2040, where biogas had a more significant role, was distributed and utility scale solar. Now, the numbers that we're seeing on those are playing significant roles, but they're not dispatchable, controllable power. You need to couple it with a lot of battery systems to make that a viable grid. Now we're doing that. There's also a lot of battery deployment going on in Puerto Rico. Is it going to be enough? It's not clear to me. I think, and I think that that's an issue. One of the things also that I'll say is that in LUMA's request to postpone by 11 months the IRP turn-in date, they had a live webinar with the Energy Bureau 3 weeks ago, where they showed where they were at. And one of the key pieces of feedback they've gotten from everybody in implementing a new IRP is people want a diversified set of energy sources, including hydroelectricity and nuclear. And that is something that both of those technologies were not seriously considered in the DOE's PR 100 study, to I think its detriment. And one of the I'm going to read one line from this this analysis, which is many Puerto Ricans will need to see grand promises of a cleaner, better grid manifest on the ground to believe them. And I think that's a key piece here. And so um, I'm just going to leave it there. And what was your takeaway from this analysis of the DOE versus the other study? I think we've
No,
yeah.
I'm with Ignacio. Let's keep saying 852 megawatts and growing, right? You know, it's not the answer for everything, but it's pretty good, and it's making things better. You know, it's not the only answer, but I mean, if you want to get depressed about those things or think, you know, it's not everything is going wrong. And I know it seems that way to a lot of people. And yeah, I mean, Luma becomes the lightning rod for everybody. You know, of course, the grid outages have gone up. I mean, you can't kind of take a system that's fundamentally, you know, not so much different in a short period of time and not have these problems. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And you know, the real question is, you know, do we still have faith that Luma can make it better? And I think so. I think so personally. But you know, if your argument is, oh, they're underperforming, and if you look at some of the articles, right, that to put that stuff out there, you know, these are typical people with, most of them have a political agenda. It may or may not align with any of the parties in Puerto Rico, but they definitely have a political agenda. You know, they want them out, right? They want Luma out. They want, you know, whether it's UTA or any of these guys who feel like, you know, they've just been, you know, put in a corner and they want their power back or anything else. There's an angle to that. But they're kind of like, if I can use an analogy, the Republicans in Congress, when Trump got elected and even before, they kept trying to repeal the ACA, right, or Obamacare, without having any concept or any thought about what's going to go into to its place. So, you know, if you did that, you'd leave tens of millions of Americans without health care. In this case, if you throw out Luma, you're going to leave Puerto Rico without, you know, anybody steering the ship. So, you know, you want to come to the table with a plan and say, you know, Luma's not good enough. They're not doing it. You know, we need to rethink this, and we want our politicians to get in there and, you know, find a way to either get them to perform better, have, you know, renegotiate the contract. That's rational. But what we're getting is, again, kind of irrationality and irrational expectations.
You know, everybody here understands that's never going to happen. I mean, I don't think you know, it's not a secret. It's not a state secret. There's no way Luma's going anywhere.
No.
You have this issue of $200 million default payment that is a serious clause in that contract. There's no way anybody, the government of Puerto Rico cannot work that out. And nevertheless, with the Fiscal Control Board standing there, and I can tell you from Duke Austin's mouth, you know, the group of Luma is not going to pay for that. So,
oh yeah,
not going anywhere. What you need to put is a supervising body to actually make them work properly, which is what we need, a fiscalizing body to be there.
Yeah,
but they're not going anywhere.
No, and it's why it's precisely why
the story of the 850 meg and growing and getting to 1 gigawatt at the end of the year is a hell of a news. I mean, and that's new. The other one is we have 246 megs already in linked into, you know, within our grid of utility scale between wind and solar, and then we also have 01 should be, you know, linked and producing 100 megawatts, 90 megawatts of AC by next year. So yeah. I mean, again, you know, there's a lot of positives here. Now, negatively, and this is one of the things that we're doing with Luma. Now, I don't know if you guys, everybody here lives in Puerto Rico, raise your hand. Okay, So
I
I
think
don't
I'm
know.
the only one who
Have you
does not.
noticed your lights flickering lately everywhere? Right, do you know what that is?
I
So,
do.
so there's a lot of DERs that, and we've been having this discussion with other people, that there's a lot of distributed energy generation that is everywhere and is disturbing the power grid.
Yeah.
And you know, we have to figure out of creating stability for that. And don't get me wrong, these utility scale projects have what they call MDRs, which is the minimal technical requirements. And these infamous MTRs are gonna actually have massive batteries that are gonna help. But we also need to find other ways, and we're proposing some stuff to Luma to be able to fix that on power quality compensators. But
Yeah.
we need to figure out a way of stabilizing the power grid, because otherwise, not only are we not gonna have power, we're gonna have bad power. And that's really bad. So, you know, again, this is what we're doing is massive. It's never been done before anywhere.
Yeah.
So we're breaking ground in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is worth pointing out here too is in well, 2 points. One is that the pushback that Luma provided against PREPA's leadership in basically saying that our seated employees through ADCO and Quanta fundamentally make the work cheaper and viable in a way that and faster to be accomplished than if they didn't exist. And so not only is the government not going to foot the $200 million bill, Ignacio, but getting rid of Luma would set the island back decades. And in terms of trying to attract the expertise and, as Tom said earlier, the A team to try to get the work done. Are they perfect? No. Do they need to be held accountable? Yes. Are there plenty of things that, as we talked with Ramon Luis Nieves about, there needs to be an energy SAR or cabinet level position at the governor's office that can, you know, keep a firm finger on the pulse about what is happening, making sure stuff moves forward and hounding it to get done. That's critically important. But that should not equate, and we should not confuse that with getting rid of Luma. One more point that I want to make just from this breakthrough study is the DOE study suggests that the electricity costs will go up in Puerto Rico from $169 a megawatt hour in 2021 to between 154 to 179 dollars per megawatt hour in 2050. And as Tom, you and I have talked about, some of that, when you account for inflation, is pretty in line with you know, a reasonable rate hike. One of the interesting other points that this made, and this goes to Ignacio, what Ignacio was saying with regards to having baseload power or being able to do you know, baseload, but also peaker and you know, contingency power, is the Vogtle plant in Georgia, this 2 gigawatt nuclear facility in Georgia that came online, that is fraught with you know, over budget, under you know, under planning, tons of permitting issues, a whole variety of
what was
headaches.
the final cost was somewhere between
178
billion.
107. Oh yeah, but the levelized cost was $178 per megawatt hour.
Yeah.
So it comes out at underneath or within the range that the DOE projects by the end of 2050, by providing a really critically and of course we don't want to replicate a Vogtle plant, right? And that's not what I'm suggesting. But there are solutions out there that we don't have to get creative. The Loot study, on the other hand, suggests that we should implement 17 gigawatts of offshore floating solar, which, you know, maybe the ocean in Finland is a little bit calmer. I can't imagine that being a viable solution for a couple of hurricane seasons and beyond. It just ends up feeling fanciful and doesn't accomplish the goals of having, you know, stable, dispatchable, controllable power that enables a utility to, you know, stay in existence long term, which we just talked about. It'd be bad to get rid of Luma. The corollary to that is we need to make sure that Luma stays successful and economically viable on the middle and long term of their relationship with Puerto Rico, challenges and all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and look, I think you're right. You adjust for inflation and a few other things, and it's not that much. But you know what it's kind of telling people is, Based on the way that we're looking at these things, and we've got a slightly better idea of this than you guys do, and ignoring technological improvements for the most part, and other mixes. If you want to get to renewables, you're going to be largely based on these sort of things. And we think with the stuff out there, I mean, what it should tell people is if it goes this direction, by 2050, Puerto Rican should have a much more stable, much more distributed, much cleaner grid and environment, but you're going to be paying about the same amount for energy that you pay now, which I'm sure nobody really wants to hear. But that's kind of, when I look at the numbers, that's kind of where it comes out for me. I don't know if most Puerto Ricans would accept that, but I think you should be able to do a lot better. But they've got to be somewhat conservative. Oh, here we go.
So just on the couple of things. One is I put in the chat the Breakthrough Institute study that Tom and I were referencing throughout our conversation today, and I encourage everybody to take a look at that, because we'll include that in the show notes as well. I think it's a pretty sober analysis, and one of the things that I hope you take away from our conversation today is proper expectation management. There are challenges ahead. There's a lot of great work that we should be proud to promote, and we should not be fooled by shiny 2-year studies or other things that sound good. I think if you make the effort to scratch under the surface and really understand what the implications of the pathways that are being designed for the island, it's worth doing. And anyway, that's part of why we're having these conversations.
Let's get past the headlines and then do a little critical thinking and analysis. So the better.
Yeah, totally. And this is the piece of evidence that I was this is example A of our need for an amateur or enthusiastic cartoonist. If you want to participate in our cartoon caption contest, or have a witty caption you think is appropriate here, send it to us via email, and we will discuss it on July 30th, which is the last Tuesday of the month, at 11 a.m. Puerto Rico time. We will be having our general Puerto Rico Energy Forum meeting, where we can discuss.
Yep. And again, look, please support us, become members, so that you can continue to join these sessions as well. And we are going to be starting up several kind of working groups. One that I'm definitely trying to arrange and get going is to begin to get people together for to really begin to work on microgrid regulation. It's largely non-existent and a mess, and Puerto Rico is going to lead the world in this category. But if we want all of these incredibly different microgrids to actually get going, get contracted, get structured, get financed, and get installed, taking that 852 way up, then we need to actually clear the road and establish the pathways. And one of those pathways is how the heck are we going to regulate them, and how are they going to work? Who are you going to contract with? Who carries the risks? And it's not a one size fits all, as you said before. This things I've defined as virtual microgrids. This things I've defined that we could think about as like a regional grid that can separate from the main grid. And there's a couple of projects like that. And then you've got the existing what you would call microgrids, the really more industrial microgrids around operations. Sort of like the canceled hospital microgrid that's been in the news recently. That fell apart for a number of reasons, but one of them was nobody really know how to do it. What's the risk? Who's taking what? How do we finance this? And even if it's government money, they're going to want to know what the deal is. Can it survive? We put 40 million or 40 megawatts. We put $100 million into whatever this microgrid is. We don't want to show up 3 years later when we're going through an election again, only to find out that this thing isn't working because nobody was planning on how to operate it, or what the risks were, or that somebody isn't paying, etc. So yeah, there's work to do. and we want to help organize thought and action through the working groups that we put together within the Puerto Rico Energy Forum. I'll tease out as well. I think we've talked about it before, and I know this is a smaller crowd. I guess Ron just has a cachet that we don't have. But we're going to do an event under Puerto Rico Energy Puerto Rico Energy Forum the end of September to coincide with National Clean Energy Week. We are tentatively going to hold it at one of the locations owned by the Vivo Beach Club group and the brewery. We've done that before. We'll probably have a couple of panels, and then either a green drinks or something like a green drinks following it. And we're gonna be taking suggestions and thinking about what those two or three panels are going to focus on. So that should be fun. We're going to be looking for sponsors to help us out with that as well. And there's more to come. So just leave you with that at the end of this.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for that reminder. The last thing I'll say as well is that, so next week, July 25th at 6 p.m., we'll have Angel Rivera de la Cruz, former senator, Puerto Rican senator, and one of the original commissioners for the Energy Bureau here in Puerto Rico, a lawyer and regular contributor to the news conversation news and analysis conversation when it comes to energy on the island. So stay tuned and join us next week. This month is going to be the last month that we are doing these segments open to the public. And so starting in August, we'll ask that you become a member to join us for those conversations. Then at the end of the month, again, July 30th, that's Tuesday at 11 a.m., we will be having as our conversation partner, Julian Herencia, who is the executive director of the Renewable Energy Producers Association here in Puerto Rico. And much of his membership is participants in the first tranche, and going to shed a lot of light on where we are in developing utility scale solar, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and what we should be proud of and concerned by, and likely lots more. So I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you on the line, and appreciate your support, participation, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.